Oh man. Listen. Well, thank you for your patience and perseverance on my complete technological failure. Anyway,
No
we got there in
problem.
the end. Worth waiting for.
We're
Um,
here.
I listen. I said to Nick just there at the start, before we had a curveball. Congratulations on Thelma. I loved it. I miss
Oh,
my
thank you.
nana so much though. It's in a
Oh,
nice way though. It made me go and dig out old photo albums and things and just kind of, yeah.
that's
And I
nice. Oh, I'm
and I
so
called my
glad.
mom and I was like, yeah, it's oh yeah, it's so lovely. And it made me laugh so much as well. It's just, yeah, it's a
Oh,
beautiful thing. It's a beautiful
thank
thing.
you. I'm
Where
so
did
glad.
what kind of spurred the idea for kind of for writing this project? Where did it come from? Why did you want to tell this story? Why did you want to give us Thelma?
What inspired me to write it was actually a scam incident that happened to my grandma. That's pretty much almost exactly what happens in the movie. She got a call from someone pretending to be me and saying that I was in jail and my nose was broken, and she got really panicked and my family got really panicked. And then luckily in real life we were able to step in before money actually
Oh
exchanged hands.
wow.
It just sort of got my wheels turning and got me imagining what might have happened if she had sent the money and set out to get it back.
Yeah.
She's always just been such a like infallible, like strong, tough, amazing presence in my entire life. So seeing her get tricked that way sort of was uh, uh alarming and just ended up inspiring me to want to write something that's kind of exploring the moment she was in, but also a testament to her grit and her tenacity and her spirit.
So when you came to write her though as well, and then when you cast someone, as wonderful as June, in that role, I mean, just perfection, just perfection. It's like what, in terms of how much did it evolve through, this character being embodied by such a huge personality and talent, really.
Well, what's nice is I always wanted it to be June. I always pictured it being June. I honestly had trouble imagining it being anybody else. It was like, there was just a big drop on that list of June, and then there are other people who could have been wonderful, I'm sure, but in my mind, it just felt like it's got to be her. She just felt right from the beginning, and she is both an amazing actor, but also has so many of the qualities that I see in my grandma and in the character, and kind of that toughness, but also that sensitivity and that humor and just the ability to kind of toggle between those really seamlessly. What was nice is that if anything, it just became kind of the best version of itself. And
Yeah.
obviously, anytime something gets on its feet, it's going to change. And anytime somebody is actually saying the words and playing the role, it's going to become theirs in a way that's hard to predict. But what was so lovely about June is it just felt like it doesn't always happen this way, but it felt like such a straight line from kind of writing it to her coming on board to making the thing. Like it was, I felt lucky that it lined up that way and that she was able to do it because I really I always wanted it to be her.
I also want to follow up kind of a sequel just on Daniel, with Fred in that role again, because I was kind of sad to sort of have to say goodbye to him because I just think his performance is just really beautiful. I thought it was just so natural and so kind of just, I don't know, it just felt really sort of responsive and kind of beautifully timed as well with that. Was that because it's, I guess, obviously that character is based on you, really.
It
Um,
is.
did Fred kind of talk to you? I mean, he's obviously given it his own spin and stuff, and he's playing the character sort of thing as
Yeah.
well. But the fact, that it's you, you've written it, you've directed it. It's like, there must have been a few questions he had.
Yeah, he's also such a wonderful actor and we actually ended up rewriting the part for him because that part was originally like a 30 something year old kind of at a different transitional moment in life. And
Yeah.
we watched White Lotus and fell in love with Fred and then ended up aging the character down. And I'm really glad we did for many reasons, but he was such a perfect, guy for the role and is such a lovely, talented, smart actor and person. And he it was funny because yeah, I mean, he's playing a version of me, but it, I think I'm sure he studied me when I wasn't looking, picked up on all my little mannerisms, but
Secretly
it
getting
was
old home videos of you and all that kind of
yeah, not that I was aware of. He could have gone around my back with that, but I think he was also just I think he got that in the way that June kind of tapped into the Thelma character and kind of
yeah,
understood that person in some way. I think Fred and part of why he wanted to do it was that he understood that character and kind of knew how to tap into it. And our versions of that were not so dissimilar, and he was able to just play it so beautifully and so naturally. He's such a natural actor. He's so good at just making things look alive
yeah.
and easy. But yeah, I think we would. Well, it was most useful. I didn't give him like a ton of background on like my childhood, so to speak, as much
Yeah.
as we just kind of would talk through scenes and talk through moments, and it felt more like a conversation than kind of like an info dump, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Because I think that all those relationships in the film are really just feel really like I've never really seen them being told that way, and they feel so kind of relatable in a way. You know, the mother and father roles well, and that kind of the sort of still overprotective nature, and then that special relationship between grandparents. You know, where that responsibility is slightly relinquished, and it can be its own thing in a way as well. I just thought they were so brilliantly observed and kind of written as well. Um,
Oh,
and I
thank
wondered
you.
if you encouraged kind of improvisation at all within some of those scenes, like especially in like that scene in the in the home, where they're kind of being interrogated by the nurses in a way.
Right.
And kind of and then also just in that kind of waiting room area as well. It's just yeah, it's really it feels just kind of you're sort of observing on kind of real experiences and real things.
Oh, well, I'm happy to hear that. It's funny you mentioned that scene because that's probably the one that was there's not a ton of improv in the shoot. There wasn't a ton of improv in the shoot. But those scenes in particular were, I think it's twofold. They were both written to be kind of chatty and overlappy and feel really kind of as natural as they could in that way. And I was lucky with Clark and Parker and Fred and Nicole and Quinn and that whole group to just have a bunch of people who were really comfortable with that kind of uh naturalism and kind of off the cuffness. But also, I would say if there was a scene where there was a little improv, it's that one. Like there's a couple little riffs or a couple little back and forths or moments that were definitely not in the script that kind of got added in that scene. Because I think it was, some scenes felt like they could support it more than others. And that one, because of its, the nature of the kind of back and forthiness and kind of the interrogation going on, it felt like there was room for a little bit of that. And
Yeah.
Nicole's so good at that. And, Clark and Parker were great at that. And everybody was just like, that was their, Quinn and Fred too. I was like, I should say everybody because honestly, everybody was really good at that. But there wasn't a ton of improv overall, but in that scene, actually, there's a little bit.
Mm.
That's probably where it pokes through.
What was the beginning of the conversations with the score? Because the music's absolutely brilliant. It's kind of like I almost feel like it's kind of June's been dropped in like an Ocean's film or something. Do you know what I mean? It's like with the kind of with the
Yes.
David Holmes kind of soundtrack, kind of just like sort of kind of egging her on sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and it's the
Yeah.
energy of it's just absolutely brilliant. What were Nick, what were the conversations that you had with regards to what the story needed or what you thought it needed, what you thought it felt like it needed.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I love the Ocean's movies, so I take that as a high compliment.
It's meant as one.
Oh yeah.
I yeah, I uh, I was lucky enough that Josh was thinking about music really early, and before he started shooting, so everything was based on the script and the initial conversations. Um, and I think the early conversations that the pace was going to be somehow like indicating pace and tempo and energy was going to be one of the things that we needed to like focus in on, but keeping it small, not like in a big way, but
Mm.
making sure that the palette, the way you were getting that pace across, felt appropriate to the movie and not sort of like so big that it felt like you were making fun of her or you were making fun of the subject. So I think those are the early kind of things we talked about, and then we also talked about the emotional side, which felt like it was going to have to come from an organic place and piano and things like that. But it was started off pretty. pretty general. And then it was definitely a process of discovery as I would write stuff and send it to him while he was shooting and talking about it a little bit. And then my whole thing is to try and get as much music to him as possible so that when he like goes to sit down to edit, at least there's some sort of jumping off point. Even if it's not totally right, we can try these initial ideas and then go from there. It's just easier to explain through music than like through words almost, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
And what was the reality of kind of your setup and your band? Because it feels like a kind of like an awesome jazz band that we could watch in a, kind of I'd be really happy with a live playback over the film. Do you know what I mean? That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like that kind of
Yeah,
jazz
that would be
flute,
awesome.
that jazz flute kind of giving it big licks. It would be wicked.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because everything we did was actually separate, but it's awesome that it sounds like a live band.
No.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
separate.
What?
Everything was recorded individually and then sort of collaged together or cut up and put together. So we would do these like just getting a big net of material. So like we went to this studio in LA called East West, which is actually the studio that Lalo Schifrin recorded the original Mission Impossible theme song in. So it was like the perfect serendipitous like
Perfect.
place to go. And we just went in there with this great drummer named Jake Reed, and we had screens set up, and he brought all his drums, like every kind of drum from like regular kits to like I don't even remember what it was called. Like I forget this thing that he
Yeah, what was
runs,
this
and it's like
thing?
there's two balls hitting the drum. I forget what it's called.
Oh, I've
You
got
were
my
calling it
kids
the
have got
flippy
one of
floppy.
them. Yeah, my
Yeah,
kids
you've
have
seen
that where
those. Yeah.
it's got a little ball that kind of bounces and hits each
Yeah, it's
side
got
as
two
you
and
do
they sort
that.
of
Yeah, yeah,
smack
yeah, yeah, yeah.
against. I have a great video of him and he looks like he's almost like praying or something. He's so concentrating so hard. So we would just do that and we'd had screens and like for like stuff like the scooter chase, he it was very open. It was like, what do you think would be cool? Like, and I'd have these sketches. Like, I like the structure, but he would like add all this amazing these fills and like new grooves and stuff. And I would then like go home and like chop it up and create a little folder of like Jake Reed material that I could then composite together and have it hit the cuts and do all the stuff you need to do to score the scene properly. But the idea is that it all comes from a place of performance and reaction to the to the picture, and it was definitely improvisatory, like in a sort of jazzy kind of way.
It's mental. I just have a vision of like a great band in one room, all kind of, vibing.
Yeah, I mean that was the idea that I wanted to sound like that because the whole concept was like um for everything needed to be I wanted it all to be like her perspectives. So like
But
for her action movies are like,
she's being Tom
like
Cruise, basically. That's
she's
her.
being Tom or she's being like Steve McQueen in Bullet or
Yeah.
like something where like her references are like those kind of movies
Mm.
where all the action movies used to just have jazz soundtracks for that like in the 60s and 70s it was just like it's like, oh, it's a chase scene, it's just a big band. And
Yeah.
so like I thought that was like if she had her movie playing in her head she'd be hearing jazz, so it was like when she goes
So
going up the
cool.
staircase it's like jazz flute. Yeah.
So who was playing flute? Did they also just get a kind of big room with
um
lots of flutes to play with?
yeah, we did the same room with this guy. Well, two different flute players. One we went to East West with a flute player named Tim McKay, and then another guy did remote, Dan Kanayuki, and they both went to USC with me. So Jake Reed went there too. It's just people I knew from school, and they're
That's
just great
It was kind of
awesome.
an
players. Yeah,
Ocean's 11 process of you recruiting musicians. Like you were
yeah, you could
finding
say
like you
that.
were kind of like building the team in your own little Ocean's way
Yeah,
and like being like, I
yeah,
need you. Like we need a drummer, we need a
yeah,
guy, and you kind of just pulled each one of these people in.
Someone
yeah,
needs to
exactly.
make that actual film, the kind of musical
Yeah,
version of Oceans, like musicians as opposed to kind of,
Yeah.
that someone needs to make that. I love that as well. That's so cool. And I love that scene as well where she arrives at the kind of, at the destination. For people who haven't seen the film, I don't want to spoil too much, but when she arrives at the destination or a destination and that and how she makes her way from the front of the shop to the back, it's such a great and respectful scene. in terms of, and so funny though as well, just from the reaction, from him watching outside the window and kind
Oh
of
yeah,
sort of egging her on, sort of thing, like especially when she kind of steps over. It is that kind of, not to keep mentioning Tom Cruise in Mission Impossibles, but that kind of when he drops down and he's got to navigate through all the laser things and stuff. It's Thelma's version of that, really, isn't it?
completely. That was the concept for that sequence 100%, was like what's the version of that
Amazing.
kind of sequence you would see in an action movie, but shrunken down to something, much smaller and much more daily life, but still threatening for her, and still has its dangers and has its perils, but we're kind of along for the ride and trying to, the ethos of the movie and the ethos of the music were similar in that way of just trying to be like, what's the appropriate size, and
Mm,
how can we do this in a way where there isn't such a discordance where it feels like we're going parody or we're punching down or we're poking fun. Because I
mm,
think something we discovered early was like, if the music's too big or if the camera is too aggressive, like there were so many ways it could tip broad and tip silly, and it was all about just trying to be restrained enough but also energetic enough within those confines to kind of fuel the thing but never feel like we're kind of poking fun. I think Nick puts it really well when he talks about scoring from her perspective. Wanting to be
mm.
on the journey with her, not kind of,
Yeah.
cutting wide and going quiet and realizing, oh, it's so small and so little. Like that just wasn't the alchemy for this one.
It also there's not enough films about the older generation that kind of celebrate them. It
There's
was
not
one
a
of the
lot.
it's one of the things I was thinking about, kind of, because I just love that there's so much in the film that kind of make you, like I was saying, I kind of dug out loads of old photo albums and kind of makes you really kind of consider how much you take the people that you have. There's a great line in it, isn't it, about kind of about the people that you love and about not taking them for granted in a way. And it's a really, it's such an entertaining, funny film, but there's a lot in there. There's a lot of kind of food for thought on so many subjects in there as well. And one of the things that I came away thinking was kind of like, well, the older generation are brilliant, and we kind of need to celebrate them more in more films like this, where it's like you're not taking the piss, you're not kind of diminishing their role and place in the world now as opposed to when they were young. It's kind of like I don't know whether that was something you were kind of consciously trying to do, or yeah, I don't know.
Definitely. I mean, for me, the piece of it that was always really conscious was just the idea that I wanted it to be a movie about these older characters, but not to feel like a movie that only could happen to an older character. Like I
Yeah,
didn't want it to feel like, oh, we're treating this in some kind of cutesy way, or we're treating it with like a really, really heavy hand. I wanted them to just feel like, okay, if this is an adventure movie or a road trip movie or a buddy comedy or whatever it is for Thelma and Ben specifically, I wanted to treat it the way you would characters kind of any age, where just the specifics, obviously, of their circumstance are being older people. And I
yeah.
think, my grandma has been old my entire life. Like she was in her like late 60s, 70 when I was born, and she's 103 now. Like her being old is
Wow.
like that's such a long swath of life. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So it's like I don't think of it as a monolith. And it's like
Mm,
in living with her, she doesn't feel like this separate thing. And or in growing up with her, especially, it wasn't like, oh, we have our family, and then there's grandma who like lives this less meaningful, more,
yeah,
smaller, weirder life or something. Like she was just, it was all kind of part of the same mix. And I think that sensibility, at least, or that feeling, was something that was important to me in the movie. Because I think Tone and Nick did a really beautiful job with it in the music, and the music is a huge tool, I think, for how the movie stays on those rails. But tone was always kind of the thing as kind
mm,
of an extension of that thought of like, how do we just make sure everything is treated in such a way that it doesn't tip? Because there
yeah.
were a lot of places where it felt like it could, and it was always kind of sanding down or massaging something this way or that way just to make sure it felt kind of in the pocket.
It was a bad memory for me because I actually got scammed about a month ago.
Oh no, what happened?
Yeah, a
Oh
weird,
no.
quite similar in that no one phoned up pretending to be my grandson because I don't have one yet. But what had happened? I got a call from the bank to say that someone had been trying to take money out, so they stopped my cards. Then a week later, I got a call from a guy who was who said he was from the bank, saying, I'm just following up the fraud investigation. So he knew all the stuff that was going on. And I just went along with it. And then I put the phone down. I was like, hmm, I've just been scammed, haven't I? I mean, he maybe got about 150 quid out of me, but I phoned the bank straight away and they were like, yep. And I was like, but he knew all this stuff. And they were like, yep, they're really good at they're really good at the job. And it's kind of like, man,
I know
crazy.
none of us are safe. It really is getting more insidious and it's so widespread. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
crazy.
I'm a great mark
Nick's a
for
big
that.
target.
I love Malcolm McDowell as well as the casted in this as well, and that line where she says about him being an actor, maybe not a good one, but you can
Maybe not a
just
star, yeah.
yeah, it's so good.
He was a good sport.
Oh, so
I'm glad we
good.
got him to do it. He was so perfect for that part as kind of, the other side of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yeah, he and June had a good thing, I think, too. It was fun to watch them
yeah,
kind of go to face off.
yeah, yeah. How did you guys meet? How did you end up working together?
You want to take it, Nick?
Well,
You do it together. You
yeah,
start.
we met in high school.
Oh.
Josh's sister is in my year. He's a couple years older than me. Um, so I always knew Josh because Josh was a legendary improvising comic in high school, and he was like famous in the high school, and people would like, oh, Josh Margolin. We would like you go see the group. Like we were on a different campus, so we would go to the upper school and see like the really great improv group, and so that's how I was like, that was my view of Josh,
Wonder if we watch this
and
now,
then
how
we
good it would be.
I think it'd be
Funny you
pretty
should
good. I
say
think it'd be
I
that.
don't
pretty
know if it holds up.
good. And I'm trying, and then oh well, the Zoe Worth, the producer of Thelma, is my soon-to-be sister-in-law. So I
Congratulations.
have many roads to Josh's Thelma.
Yeah, Nick and I have known each other. We were like kind of new, we were, friendly, but then reconnected through Zoe really, and through Nick dating Sarah, and just sort of our worlds overlapping. And
Mm.
I'd always been a fan of Nick's work as well, and his music has always been really unique and impressive and distinctive. And Zoe early on was talking about how she thought he would be a really wonderful fit for the movie. And so and then he and I basically met, early on in the process, like he was saying, before there was, once there was a script, but before there was anything more, and kind of talked about how we saw it. And I think we just felt pretty early on that we were swimming in the same direction and had the same vision in mind. But yeah, we'd known each other a long time, but this is the first time we've gotten to work together in this capacity, which was really cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I hope it's the start that kind of director composer sort of relationship because
I do too.
yeah, yeah. What is next?
yeah.
Do you know what's next, or are you, is it kind of like take a breath before you sort of jump off that diving board again?
It's a little bit of that. It's I'm working on a couple things, some of which are also with Zoe Worth and Chris Kay, our producers and champions of this movie from day one, who I just want to give a quick shout out to for all of their amazing work on getting this thing to where it is. But I'm working on a couple things that kind of the group of us want to still take out together, and trying to get back into some writing. I thought I could write and kind of do the rollout of the movie, and I've been gravely mistaken. So I'm trying to catch up on a little bit of that, but hopefully things will start to take shape soon.
And what about the performance side of things though as well? Is that kind of is that on the back burner, or is it still something that's important to you, or is this the kind of role you want to take for now?
I still love it. I think, it's the kind of thing where when the opportunities arise, I love to do it. I think, mostly kind of writing and directing and making things has been where I've kind of shifted the bulk of my energies. But if the thing is right and if the opportunity arises, I do love performing, and they've always felt very connected to me for what it's worth. Like just growing up kind of making things and trying to, find ways to do that. Oftentimes you're wearing a lot of different hats. And so I think to me, they all feel close together. So I think, we'll see. Hope it'd be fun to reintroduce it to the mix a little bit, but
Yeah.
to be determined.
What about you, Nick? What's next for you
Um, well,
that you can
working on
talk
a
about?
couple document.
It's
I'm
always that
working on
thing
a
where I
couple
ask that
documentaries.
question. People go, "Well, I could, but I'm not allowed to
I
talk
think
about
it's unclear what I think I'm fine. um, I'm doing a documentary right now with another really great composer, Leopold Ross, who I've worked with on a lot of stuff. Um, and then I'm doing another documentary with another composer named Claudia Sarn, who, and that's a 4-part miniseries. So those are my two main things right now. Um, so yeah, that's basically it.
I think what
Yeah,
you
and
need
then
to
I'm
do.
getting married, so that's
Oh,
taking up a lot of time as well.
totally.
Yeah,
Well, I wish you all
yeah.
the best for the upcoming nuptials. But I think you need to get
Thank
the
you.
I think you need to get the jazz band in the room for a live playback of the film at some point.
It's
I
a great
think
idea.
that's
Yeah,
Now I can't stop thinking about that. Now I need to see it live all together.
yeah.
be so cool. They could all be sat in what they call the mobility scooters as well whilst they play that the ones that sit down. That would be
Yeah.
even yeah.
That could be nice. We could do a
Yeah.
parade kind of. They could be
Yeah,
moving.
exactly. Listen, it's been an absolute treat to get to chat to you and celebrate your work on this film because it really I remember seeing this trailer for the first time and I was like, oh, I want to see this so badly. And it just really kind of yeah, it was everything I wanted it to be and more, to be honest. So
Oh,
thanks so much for your time and huge congratulations with the film.
thank you so much. That's Nick's music in the trailer too, by the way,
Thanks so
which was
much.
nice.
Oh yeah.
What a rarity.
I know we got to
Yeah, there
really
you
use
go.
it.
That is a
Bravo.
rarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Seriously, this was
pleasure.
really
And
Yeah,
fun.
thanks so
yeah,
much.
and thanks for your kind of, patience with me on the technology front as well. I
Please.
really appreciate it.